Welcome to another deep dive. We're tackling the Bhagavad Gita this time around, and you've got excerpts from two different commentaries for us to dig into. One by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and another by Swami Adgadanand. It should be interesting to see how their takes differ. We're not just skimming the surface this time. We're going deep, exploring how the Gita's wisdom, on duty, desire, and the nature of reality, how all of that might be surprisingly relevant to our lives today.
It never ceases to amaze me how relevant this ancient text still is for the modern learner. I mean, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with information, right? Facing these complex choices. And the Gita, even though it's from a completely different era, offers a framework for navigating all of that.
Yeah, and we jump right into the action, right? We're on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. We meet Arjuna, this warrior who's facing a massive dilemma: fight his own family for a rightful kingdom, or choose pacifism. It's this clash between duty and personal morality.
And that's the genius of it. This epic war becomes a metaphor for our own internal struggles.
Yeah.
Like we're all on a battlefield of sorts, right?
Yeah.
Constantly facing tough choices.
Yeah.
Weighing what we should do versus what feels right emotionally.
How often do those two things actually line up, right? It's like this internal tug of war. It's a pretty universal experience, I think. But the Gita doesn't just present the dilemma, it offers a way to understand it through this concept of svadharma, individual duty.
And what's interesting about svadharma is that it goes beyond just a rigid set of rules. It's not about being locked into a specific role, but about understanding your unique nature and how you can best contribute to the world.
The Gita gives some really specific examples, though, doesn't it? Like, a warrior's duty is to protect, even if it means fighting, while a scholar's duty might be to seek knowledge and teach. So how do we reconcile those specific examples with this idea of svadharma being individualized?
That's where the nuance comes in. The examples are there to illustrate a principle, not to create this rigid system. It's more about understanding the underlying motivation. The warrior's svadharma isn't just about fighting. It's about protecting the innocent, upholding justice. The scholar's isn't just about knowledge for knowledge's sake. It's about sharing that knowledge, illuminating the world.
So it's about understanding the deeper purpose behind our actions, not just the actions themselves. I'm starting to see how this could be helpful for someone like the learner, who's constantly striving to understand and make sense of the world.
Absolutely. It's about aligning your actions with your values, your unique potential. Like a software developer, driven by the learner archetype. They might find their svadharma in creating educational apps that empower others.
That's a great example, a really concrete example. And speaking of internal battles, the Gita really doesn't hold back when it comes to desire. It dives right into kama and how our attachment to things, possessions, status, relationships, is a major source of suffering.
It's so relatable, though, isn't it? I mean, think about how much of our daily stress comes from wanting things to be different, clinging to what we have, or fearing what we might lose. It's this constant chase that often ends up leaving us empty.
It's like that saying, wanting what you don't have is a recipe for unhappiness. But how do we escape that trap? The Gita doesn't just leave us hanging with that bleak realization, does it?
No, it doesn't. It offers tools to help us understand and manage these desires. One of those tools is the concept of the three gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas.
Okay, right, the gunas. Just a reminder for our listeners, these are forces that influence our thoughts, actions, even our choices. But let's get practical. How could understanding these gunas actually help someone manage their desires, especially in the context of information overload that the learner is facing?
That's a great question. So imagine you're constantly bombarded with new information, feeling this pressure to keep up, to learn everything. That's often driven by rajas, this desire for achievement and stimulation. The Gita suggests that becoming aware of this guna can help you make conscious choices about what information you consume, allowing you to focus on what truly matters instead of getting swept away by the current.
So it's about using that self-awareness to make choices that are aligned with your svadharma, rather than just reacting to every impulse or external pressure.
Exactly. The Gita encourages us to cultivate sattva, which brings clarity and peace. It helps us discern what's truly valuable and make choices that lead to lasting fulfillment, rather than just chasing those fleeting desires.
It's almost like the gunas offer this framework for understanding why we make the choices we do. And once you understand the why, you can start to shift your behavior.
So fascinating. One of the things that always gets me about the Gita is its discussion of the soul's journey. We're not just these physical bodies. We're eternal beings moving through lifetimes. It really does shift your perspective when you think about it that way. The Gita suggests that. The actions we take, the state of our consciousness, all that influences what form we take in our next life.
Okay, but isn't that a bit deterministic? If everything's already decided by past actions, do we even have free will? I'm curious how the Gita addresses that apparent contradiction.
Well, the Gita says that while our past actions create a certain momentum, karma, we still have the power to make choices in the present that can change our course. It's like we're sailing a ship. The wind and currents from the past are pushing us in a certain direction. But we can still adjust our sails, right? Steer the ship towards where we want to go.
I like that analogy. So it's not about being powerless against fate, but about understanding we have agency within the circumstances we're given. And the Gita emphasizes that. Our thoughts, intentions, even seemingly small actions, all that contributes to shaping our future.
That's where the concept of yoga becomes really powerful. The Gita presents yoga not just as physical postures, but as a way of life. It's about cultivating discipline, focus, and detachment in all aspects of our lives.
Okay, so I can see how that ties into managing desires, making conscious choices. But what does that actually look like in practice? Give me an example, something that might resonate with our listener, the learner.
Okay, imagine you're deeply engrossed in a research project, driven by this desire to uncover some new insight. The pressure builds, deadlines are looming, and you start to get caught up in anxieties about whether you'll succeed, whether your work will be recognized.
Oh, been there. It's so easy to get caught in that cycle of worry and self-doubt.
The Gita would say that in that moment. You have a choice. You can get swept away by those anxieties, or you can practice yoga by focusing on the task at hand, putting in your best effort, without getting attached to the outcome. It's about finding that flow state, where action and awareness are merged.
So it's not about denying the challenges or pretending they don't exist. It's about choosing how you respond to them. And the Gita suggests that this approach can lead to a greater sense of inner peace, even when things are difficult.
Exactly. It's about finding that equilibrium, even amidst the chaos. And speaking of chaos, the Gita doesn't shy away from acknowledging that suffering is a part of life. But it also suggests that there are ways to transcend that suffering, to find true happiness.
That's where things get really interesting. How does the Gita propose we do that? It's not just about positive thinking, right?
No, it goes much deeper than that. One of the key teachings is the importance of detaching from our ego, that sense of I, me, mine. The Gita points out that this ego is the source of much of our suffering because it leads us to cling to things that are impermanent and to constantly compare ourselves to others.
That makes sense. Our ego is always telling us we need more, that we're not enough. But the Gita is offering a different perspective. It's inviting us to connect with something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from the small self to the larger self, whether you call that the divine, the universe, or simply your true nature as a soul.
Now, one of the things I find most powerful about the Gita is its emphasis on self-knowledge. It's not just a set of rules. It's a guide to understanding yourself on a deeper level.
Absolutely. And one of the tools that Gita provides for self-reflection is the concept of the three gunas we talked about earlier. By becoming aware of which guna is dominant in us at any given moment, we can gain valuable insights into our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors.
So if I'm feeling lethargic, unmotivated, that might be a sign that Tamas is taking over. But if I'm feeling ambitious, driven, maybe even a bit competitive, that could be Rajas at play.
You got it. And recognizing those patterns within ourselves,
Right,
without judgment, can help us make more conscious choices. If you find yourself caught in tamas, you might choose activities that cultivate sattva, like spending time in nature or engaging in creative pursuits.
It's like having this little internal barometer that can help you navigate your inner landscape. But all this talk about self-knowledge and the soul's journey, is there a specific practice or technique that the Gita recommends for putting this into action?
You're talking about meditation, right? It plays a central role in the Gita's teachings.
Right. But when I think of meditation, I often picture someone sitting cross-legged in a quiet room. Is that the only way to meditate, according to the Gita?
Not at all. The Gita recognizes that meditation can take many forms. It can be chanting mantras, focusing on your breath, engaging in selfless service to others, or even just bringing your full attention to whatever you're doing in the present moment.
So even washing the dishes or walking the dog could be a form of meditation if you approach it with mindfulness. That's pretty cool.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that awareness, that connection to the present moment, no matter what you're doing.
And the Gita suggests that this practice of meditation can lead to some pretty profound transformations. It helps us overcome negative habits, cultivate positive qualities like peace and compassion, and ultimately experience a state of liberation from suffering.
It's a path of inner transformation, of connecting with your true self,
Now, throughout our deep dive, we've been exploring the Gita through two different lenses, two different commentaries. Have you noticed any significant differences in how these two sources interpret its teachings?
One distinction that stands out to me is the emphasis placed on bhakti yoga, the path of devotion. Prabhupada's translation places a strong emphasis on surrendering to Krishna as the supreme deity, engaging in devotional practices like chanting his name.
And how does that compare to Adgadanan's perspective?
Adgadanand seems to offer a more inclusive approach, acknowledging the validity of multiple paths to liberation, including jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, and karma yoga, the path of selfless action.
So it's like both sources recognize the importance of connecting with the divine, but they offer different approaches to how that connection is cultivated. That's pretty interesting.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Gita. It offers this multifaceted tapestry of wisdom that can resonate with people from diverse backgrounds and spiritual inclinations. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
You've mentioned karma yoga a few times, and it seems especially relevant to the learner. Can you unpack that a bit more? What does it mean to practice karma yoga, and how might it benefit someone who's constantly striving for knowledge and growth?
Karma yoga is essentially about performing actions without attachment to the results. It's about doing what's right, fulfilling your duty, not for personal gain or recognition, but because it's the right thing to do.
That sounds noble, but also really challenging. How do you detach from the desire for recognition, especially in a world that's so focused on achievement and accolades?
It's a process, a practice. The Gita suggests that. By shifting our focus from what's in it for me to how can I serve, we can gradually purify our minds and hearts.
So it's about aligning your actions with a larger purpose, something beyond your own ego. I can see how that could be incredibly liberating, freeing you from that constant need for validation. It seems like the Gita offers a lot of tools for navigating challenges and making choices that are aligned with our svadharma. But are there specific qualities or virtues that it encourages us to cultivate?
Oh, absolutely. One that's repeatedly emphasized is equanimity. That ability to remain calm and centered amidst all the ups and downs of life.
So it's not about suppressing emotions or pretending that difficulties don't affect us, but about cultivating an inner stability that allows us to weather those storms without being completely swept away.
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding that balance, that inner peace, even when external circumstances are chaotic. And another crucial quality is self-control. The Gita highlights how unchecked desires can lead us astray, distracting us from our true purpose.
That's so relevant today, right? I mean, we're constantly bombarded with messages encouraging us to indulge, to acquire more, to chase those fleeting pleasures.
The Gita offers this powerful counter-narrative. It reminds us that lasting happiness and fulfillment come not from external gratification, but from inner mastery, from aligning our actions with our highest values.
It's about becoming the master of your own mind, rather than being a slave to your desires. Now, the Gita doesn't shy away from the big questions, does it? It even tackles these difficult topics like death and the afterlife. What perspective does it offer on those subjects, and how might that be relevant to our modern understanding?
The Gita's perspective on death is really quite beautiful. It doesn't view death as an end, but as a transition, a shedding of the physical body, as the soul moves on to its next journey. And the quality of that next journey is influenced by our actions and the state of our consciousness in this life.
So it's not about feeling death or trying to cling to this life, but about recognizing it as a natural part of a larger cycle.
Exactly. It encourages us to live each day with intention, knowing that our choices have consequences, not just in this life, but beyond.
As we've been diving deep into the Gita, I'm struck by both the wisdom and the challenge it presents. I mean, it's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually, but quite another to actually embody them in our daily lives.
You hit the nail on the head. The Gita isn't just a book to be read. It's a path to be walked. It requires commitment, discipline, and a willingness to confront our own limitations.
So for our listener who's feeling inspired to delve deeper and apply these teachings, what advice would you offer?
I would say approach the Gita, not just as a text, but as a teacher. Study it slowly, contemplate its verses, and most importantly, experiment with putting its wisdom into practice. In your own life, it's a living teaching, not just an ancient philosophy.
And don't be afraid to seek guidance from those who have already walked this path, right? Find a teacher, join a community, engage in conversations that help deepen your understanding.
Absolutely. The Gita is a vast and profound text. It's a journey of self-discovery, and I think we've only just begun to explore its depths together.
I agree. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked your own curiosity and inspired you to explore the Bhagavad Gita further. Remember, the battlefield is within, and the weapons we need are self-knowledge, self-control, and selfless action. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep diving deep.